For today, we are going to address an observation that one can see and a teaching about that observation. The observation is that when one observes how Judaism is practiced, there seems to be a strong emphasis on doing mitzvahs. Are you familiar with this phenomenon?
Yeah.
Okay. And that emphasis seems to be much greater than the emphasis on other things, such as one's spiritual experiences, developing one's character. Not that these are bad things, but traditionally Jews seem to be quite obsessed with making sure people are doing mitzvahs. Disproportionately so. And the more concrete and physical the mitzvah, the more Jews seem to be obsessed about it. So there's a question, why? Now, sometimes when we see people behave in particular ways, the assumption is, well, that's just because nature of people, that's the way people are. We downplay that because it doesn't conform with a particular perspective, a particular value system. But it's also true that sometimes people, even though they're not necessarily consciously aware of something, on a collective level they have a deep sense of something that is true. The way the Talmud puts this in a different context is that even though the Jewish people themselves are not prophets, they're the children of prophets. There's a kind of collective prophetic insight that we have. And so if the Jewish people collectively place such a strong emphasis on the practical doing of mitzvahs, perhaps that's because they're onto something, even if they're not consciously aware of what that is. The other side of this is that we actually do have teachings that explain the importance of doing physical mitzvahs. So it's not just that this is an observation and an insight, but we actually have teachings that quite explicitly say this. We're going to be focusing on a teaching from the Zohar. The Zohar compares the divine presence to a flame. You can see this in the verse where the verse says that Hashem, your God, is a consuming fire. So, divine presence is a flame. The person is like the wick. And what happens when flame meets wick? One of two things happen. Either the flame consumes the wick, in which case, and then what happens?
Burns.
And then what happens?
There's
no wick
there's nothing left.
and no flame. Right? That's what happened, right? The other possibility is that the wick doesn't really catch fire, right? And the fire kind of goes out and the wick remains. So what does that mean about a person's encounter with the divine presence? One of two things is going to happen. Either the divine presence will catch hold of the person, what will result? Result in total eradication of the person. And then what's going to be left? Not the person and not the divine presence anymore. That does not seem like a positive thing. What's the other possibility that could occur? Is divine presence can't really grab hold of the person, right? There's, like if certain materials are not so flammable, you light them and they're too thick, they're too dense, whatever the case may be, and the flame kind of flickers and jumps and disappears. Right? There's no way that if all you have is the flame and the wick, that you can create any kind of stable connection between those two things, where there's a lasting flame that is present with the wick. It just doesn't work. And what the Zohar says is that therefore there needs to be oil, just like if you have an oil lamp, right? The wick draws the oil through it, and via the introduction of the oil, the flame can rest stably, burn brightly, and the wick remains intact. It gets singed a little bit, but it remains intact. And as long as there's oil there, that can go on forever. Which means if a person wants to be able to encounter the divine presence in a way that is true, the way that is stable, the way that is lasting, they're going to need a third element, the element that would be symbolically corresponding to the oil. So far, so good? Okay. So the question is, what is the oil? Correct. The oil are the mitzvahs. And specifically, the physical mitzvahs, the things we do. Now, what we need to do in order to understand this is that we first need to unpack a little bit the metaphor of the divine presence being like fire. Okay? We need to also unpack what the symbolism of oil is. Right? After all, there are many things that can burn. Why oil specifically? Once we understand that, then we're going to go back and try and understand why is it that the mitzvahs are the oil, and specifically the physical, tangible mitzvahs that we do in actuality. Good? What is the divine presence? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's the presence of God. Okay, so take God out of the picture for a moment. When you say the presence of anybody, what does that mean? Is the presence them? You say that person has a presence. What does that mean? What?
Energy.
They're there?
Themselves.
What? The way they present themselves? What did you mean when you say they're there?
They're a physical.
So
aspect.
could somebody be in a room and not really have much of a presence?
Yeah.
But they're physically there, right? One person isn't more or less physically there than another person, right? In that sense, it's just binary. But we think of presence as more and less.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. If the teacher's like, who's here? Or like,
But that-
you had
yeah,
to say
right,
present.
Right, that's true. But those are two different words. Presence is a noun. Does someone have a presence? It's different than saying, is someone present? They're related words, I agree with you, but they mean
definition
different.
of a noun is a person, place, or thing. It's
Or an
not like
idea.
a person is
Or an idea. Most nouns that adults use in conversation tend to not be people, places, and things.
So that idea of a person is a thing.
So they say he has a presence, or she has a presence, or they don't have a presence, right? I can give you lots of other ones. Freedom, justice, beauty, causality, importance. Those are all nouns. They're not people, places, or things. There's something we mean by what is this thing called the presence. I'm referring to something, and it's not the simple fact that the person is either there or not there in that physical sense, because that's a binary, and we don't speak about that on the binary.
No, I get what you're saying, but I don't just like saying.
Well, they're related. They're related ideas. Okay. Could someone be in a class and not be paying attention?
Yeah, sure.
And then we would say that they're not so present. But notice again here, we now we start adding degrees, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so there's a notion of present in the very physical sense of you either are or you're not. There's a notion that we speak of people having a presence. We speak about being present in some kind of way you're relating to what's going on around you. And these are all related things, but not all the same. So let's go back to what the divine presence is. Is it like God wasn't here and then he showed up one day, now he's here, and then he disappears again? No. Right? So it's not present in that physical sense. God is always present. Okay, what is it like? God is not being present enough. He's not like really paying attention. They got distracted. He was too busy with the angels and wasn't paying attention to what was going on. Like student in class.
People,
You
right?
could say that about people. The question is that true about God?
No, because he's infinite.
I missed the premise of like why we're asking the question.
Because I want to know what you mean when you spoke about the
Just
divine
what
presence.
is God's presence?
What does divine presence mean? Now,
Right, but like about people also, you can say like, oh, like we felt their presence there.
I agree with you.
right?
So the question is, what is that? I mean, my point is, we felt their
Like
presence is
energy.
different, right? My point is that.
God, it's unique
My,
because
wait a second. My point is that that we can use the word present to mean like the actual fact that something is there, or the person is there, in a very physical sense, and that kind of binary notion of present or not present. We could talk about that, but let me just say God is present everywhere, and that's that discussion. That's clear what we mean when we speak of the divine presence, and that's also what we mean when we speak of the presence of a person. We also speak about a person being present in a more way of the way they're relating to what's going on around them, right? A student not paying attention, we want them to be more present, more focused, more attentive, more engaged. And that's like, does that apply to God? And a straightforward answer is no. There's plenty of verses to this effect that God doesn't sleep, he doesn't slumber, things like that. So presence is much more about how others have a sense Right? So if someone has if someone has a presence, that means when they're there, people feel that they're there. You say that they're kind of an energy. Okay, so if somebody is very arrogant, it's not just that they have a large presence, but that presence actually feels different than, say, someone who's very humble. Like, you could have a humble person with also a large presence. What happens to a person with a very, very strong presence, but they're very humble? When they're in the room, what does that feel like? It feels like good, because if you think about it, you ever see like a vacuum draws things in? So a humble person is a person who, in their sense of reality, there's space for others. And if their presence exudes kind of something of who they are, then you're in an environment where you feel like something's like drawing you out. It's trying to draw you out. Like, be more here. Whereas a person is arrogant,
There's no space.
it's the opposite, right? Their presence is like, where I am, others can't be, and then that presence kind of exudes that energy and it pushes them away. Right? We can think about joy having a certain kind of presence, sadness having a certain kind, right? There's this kind of radiating the quality of that person out beyond themselves. Dignity has a certain kind of person. Some people have a dignity to them, and you feel like, oh, this is a person I should respect. The person is, and some people not so much. Parenthetically, is not topic of conversation. One of the reasons why clothing is so important in Judaism is because in order for a person to have a dignified presence, that corresponds with wearing clothing. So back in the day when they had bathhouses where people are not clothed, there was an understanding that the idea you have to show people honor and respect and based on their position, side, and how dignified that doesn't apply in a bathhouse because no one's wearing clothing. They're not kind of reduced to their more like biological creature level. Yeah. So there's a lot to talk about the presence. Now, so when we speak about the divine presence, what do we mean? We don't mean God. We mean
The way God makes us feel.
so the simple thing is say the way God makes us feel. Okay. The problem with that is, if I don't feel God's presence, doesn't mean the presence isn't there.
Well, by the third definition, yeah, because you said presence is how others experience you.
Mm-hmm. So, if there's light shining in a room and the people in the room are blind and they don't see it, does that mean the light isn't there to be seen?
No, but then I think the third definition is incorrect.
So, it's not that
Presence can never be defined by other people's experience.
Okay. It depends. It depends what we mean. Sometimes things are defined in terms of others in the abstract or the principle. What do I mean? If I keep everything in my thoughts to myself, I am in no way revealing what's going on in my head. If I speak, I am revealing it. Now, what happens if I speak in such a way that you don't understand it? So we can say maybe I'm doing a bad job of revealing it, or you're doing a bad job of paying attention, right? Whatever the case might be, right? But that's very different than if I just kept my mouth shut to begin with, right? If I keep my mouth shut to begin with, you could be the most sensitive, attentive person, and we speak the same language, we have the same cultural context, you still don't know because I haven't shared it with you. On the other hand, if I start giving a class in deep chassidic ideas in Yiddish to a bunch of people from South Korea who don't speak Yiddish, right? The fact that they don't get anything is due to a lot of mismatches, language, cultural background, all these sorts of things, right? But that's because they're not situated to be able to pick up on it, right? You take somebody who does speak Yiddish, who does have that cultural background, you put them right there and they immediately get it. So it's available to be experienced and to be perceived. That doesn't necessarily mean you specifically have that capacity. So, when we speak about the divine presence, we mean assuming a person has the required spiritual sensitivity, then there would be something of kind of radiating the truth of God in that place or in that thing. What if I don't have the requisite spiritual sensitivity? I won't notice it. But that's, yeah, and to use maybe a little bit more of a more precise, although uncomfortable metaphor or analogy. Have you ever been in a social situation and you can like tell there's conflict, or you can tell there's a certain dynamic going on, right? And you use that to navigate what's appropriate and inappropriate. Mm-hmm. And you notice there's other people that like just don't seem to get it, right? is that because it's not like clear what's going on, or is it because there's something off in their social development? Right? Now, sometimes that's correctable, and sometimes it's not correctable, and it's a whole discussion, right? But that's not this. It's not like this is a hidden secret. It's like anybody who has developed a social sensitivity picks up on the fact, oh, like it's really not really appropriate to say anything right now, or maybe like saying this type of thing would help diffuse the situation, and then someone could just be oblivious. Okay? The divine presence rests in the holy temple. The temple was destroyed. When the Gentiles went in and destroyed the temple, why didn't they feel stopped by the divine presence?
Still not open to receiving it.
In fact, there were Jews who sinned in the temple. A person could be very open with and very vulnerable about deep things, and someone else could just be completely wrapped up in himself and not pick up on it. Right? So when Chassidus, when we speak about it being revealed, yes, revelation is in terms of others, but whether someone is actually experiencing the revelation doesn't determine whether it's revealed or not. Because the other has to be paying attention, has to be sensitive, has to be engaged, and if they're not, it could be revealed, and still they're not picking up on it. Okay, so, it's a separate discussion, not for today's topic, of whether the divine presence is being experienced by us. Okay? Now, if a person is humble, their presence makes people feel more welcome, makes people feel more like they're valued, more like there's more space for them. If a person is arrogant, the opposite. If a person is joyous, their presence brings a certain lightness and positivity to the environment, right? Think about like a wedding, and somebody comes to the wedding, music isn't playing yet, and they're like genuinely happy and genuinely like filled with joy, right? It changes the whole dynamic, right? Because that presence, right? What happens if somebody is miserable? What does their presence do? Brings down, right? Like no one wants a miserable person at the Shabbos table. It ruins it for everybody. Right? So God's presence exudes the truth of God. That make sense? Okay. What is the truth of God? The truth of God is that there's only God. Which is a topic for this class or a different class? A different class. We could do that topic. But right now, that's not the topic. The point is that is the truth of God. The truth of God is that there's only God. So what happens if God's presence is revealed? Say if God's presence is revealed in the temple, what would that mean?
Then nothing else could exist.
Then in the temple there's only God. So what happened to the temple then?
So is that not saying that it's...
What? If in the temple is the presence, there's the presence of God. The presence of God means it exudes or reveals the truth of God. The truth of God is there's only God. So if in the temple it's revealed there's only God, then what happens to the temple?
Is that not comparable to like the arrogant person? Is like where there's no space for anyone else? Is that not comparable?
What is arrogance?
Well, you were saying like
I know. What is arrogance?
believing that there's like you're better than others.
You're better than others.
Oh,
so
but
you're
it's
better than
including- it's
you're
including
better than
others.
others doesn't mean there's only you.
Right, it's including others.
Arrogance is not arrogance.
But it's still not leaving space for...
That may be true, but it's see, there's only you and arrogance are not the same thing.
Right.
Okay, let me give you this becomes like an important point in Chassidus, which gets lost a lot of times in the way we speak. Like, we would say that someone who's like a narcissist, like everything's about them, and they're wrapped up in themselves, and the only one that matters is them, and it's all about them, and all about them, and all about them. But it's not that there's only them. Do you know how I can tell it's not only them? What happens to a narcissist if you tell them that they can't have what they want?
They freak out.
Why do they freak out?
Because
it's all about them and what they want.
someone else is taking that.
Because
It's
it turns
threatening.
out that a narcissist has a very acute sense that there's stuff other than themselves and feels threatened by it, and the way that they feel safe and secure is to turn everything
Away.
that is not about them, throw it away, and make everything that's within their vicinity
About them.
about them. Right? If there's only you, are you threatened by anything?
No.
Do you like? Does it's like if there's only you and someone insulted you,
It's you.
like I mean, it's like it's not exactly the same thing as only you, but it's close. Psychologically, a person gets closer to this. If you get insulted by somebody and you had something close to this godlike sense, one of two things is the case. Either they said something that's true about you, in which case it was true independent of them saying it, right? So there's no reason to be like offended by them. Or they said something that isn't true about you, in which case, why does it matter?
So is Hashem a narcissist?
No.
So you're saying isn't the only thing true to God?
And that's not what a narcissist is. A narcissist is someone who's a very, very acute sense that other things exist and feels threatened by them. And the way they deal with that
There's still an engagement.
is they
with
turn
someone
everything to be about, they twist everything to be about them, and when they can't, they become rejectionist or aggressive. It's not even they want to be God. It's nothing like God at all. If somebody would be more like God, they wouldn't be like a narcissist at all. Because, in other words, either something is somehow part of them and their life and whatever, in which case, great, or it's not, in which case, also great. Like, what's the big deal, one way or the other? The fact that it's actually very hard to be like God, because to be like God would mean that you're not altered by what's going on around you. You're not altered by how everybody relates to you, or how everybody thinks about you, or how complicated. And the thing is, like, as human beings, like, you can't get there by focusing on yourself. It doesn't work. You become narcissist when you focus on yourself. The thing is like this: God is. It's not that God looks around everything and says, "Oh, all this stuff is nonsense. The only thing that matters is me." It's not true. God looks at things very, very simple. If it exists, if it's real, then as far as He's concerned, what does that mean? It's somehow part of Him.
Yeah.
Okay. Is He real? And if it's part of Him, then what is this other thing? It's also real, whatever the thing is.
It's only real in His realness.
That's right, but He's God. This is the thing. So you have to realize, God is not something that exists in reality.
Exactly.
God is the ground. So it's as real as He is. Is God good? Yeah, so this is good. Is God unified? Yeah, so this is unified with everything else. It's nothing like an arrogant person at all. Because God is not like an old man in the sky. He's not a being who exists in the world. Like, that's the thing. It's very important to wrap our heads around as much as we can. If there's nothing other than God, then that means that the other stuff, as far as He's concerned, isn't other. It's subsumed within His truth and His goodness and His whatever. Now, that's not a humble person. It's not an arrogant person. It's like a different thing altogether. A humble person is a way of relating to others. An arrogant person is a way of relating to others. This is not relating to others. Like, there isn't others. What, so the stuff doesn't exist? No, it somehow exists as part of His unity, as part of His goodness, as part of His wonderfulness. Okay. And when the divine presence revealed, means that truth is being manifest, is being revealed, that if one were sensitive enough, one could pick up on it. Yeah.
I just don't understand how, if that's the case, first of all, that God commands us and that God fosters this sense of autonomy in us. Like, if God really, everything is subsumed in God and nothing affects Him, why does He react with anger or punish the Israel at times in history?
I said that this could be a topic of the class, but it's not the topic of the class, so I'm not going to answer.
That was the one you said could be a topic.
Yeah, the unity of God and how there's only one God. If that's the truth of God, now we can understand what we mean by divine presence.
It's not just the unity of God. I guess it's more like, why does God react to things?
That's all fair questions, but I can't teach the two topics at once. I mean, I like to teach
It just
multiple things
really
at once.
seems to contradict, I guess.
I agree with you.
Okay,
That's
so
why it could be a whole topic. Things which are easy to understand make before we're in classes. Let's learn why it's good to be a good person. Honestly, do you need a class on why it's good to
Well,
be a
yeah,
good
because
person?
good is so subjective. What does that even mean?
No, I mean that class on what's good. That you need a class on. Right?
But good to be a good person is
Like-
just two relative terms.
It was
stacked on top of each
whatever
other.
whatever you think should be you aspire to, one should aspire to
Right,
those things that are
exactly.
like
It's
really,
cyclical.
right, it doesn't mean
basically.
anything. right? Once we get into what is good, like I
let's
don't know.
talk about why doing what you think is good is good.
Or we could have like stories about the patriarchs and matriarchs who do stuff that seem to be totally immoral, and somehow that's supposed to be considered good. Like that would be a class, right? See? Okay.
You can get more.
The stuff that we don't know is what makes it interesting. Getting back to the topic. So, now, here's the thing. There is one thing that cannot be present. There's one thing that cannot be present when God's presence is present. And that is the sense that there is something other than God. Now, I'm going to be very vague as to what that means. Because, like you pointed out, what about our autonomy? What about this, right? Like, the temple doesn't disappear when God's presence is revealed there, right? So, what it means to be other than God is itself a good question. But whatever that is, that stands in opposition to God's presence being revealed. Okay? Now, so what that means is things have to undergo, in order for God's presence to be revealed, things have to undergo some kind of a change in their being. From their being exuding a sense that they're other than God to somehow their being subsumed within God. This is very lofty and this is very abstract, so we have a metaphor. And the metaphor is when something burns. Now, we don't live in the age where we burn firewood. We'll start with firewood. But if you were to go to the market and buy firewood, what are you buying?
Fuel.
Fuel. Okay? Fuel's a word. Unpack the word.
Something which feeds the fire.
So what you're buying is warmth.
Oh.
What you're buying is light. But what you have now isn't the warmth and light itself. It's what will become the light and will become the warmth, right? Right? In other words, you say, "Oh, there was no firewood," right? You're not
You
freaked.
can't do
You're
it with
freaked
just
out
the
because now
fire.
there's not what?
You can't do it with just the wood.
Right, but what are you spending your hard-earned money on is not on wood.
Oh.
What you see in the wood is not the wood itself, but
Heat.
what the wood becomes, the fire, the light, the warmth, right? Makes sense, right? When you pay for your electric bill, I want you to think about this. Are you really paying for electricity? You don't care about electricity. You're paying
Right.
for communication, illumination,
Entertainment.
entertainment, comfort, food readily available, right? That's what you're paying for, right? So, right? In other words, we have to be someone that see through things to what their kind of core being is all about, okay? Now, so you take the wood home and you burn the wood. Now, here's the thing. So there's a conflict now with the wood. On the one hand, you bought the wood for the light and the warmth of the fire. But the physical wood resists that. How do I see the physical wood resist that? Because if anyone ever
It
made
doesn't
a wood
catch
fire.
fire.
Well, first off, you've got to
Takes a minute.
you've got to work on it to make it catch fire. And then even when it catches fire, it crackles, produces smoke. You see that to some degree the wood lends itself to becoming the fire, the light and the warmth that you want. But to some degree the physical wood is resisting it. Good. Now let's contrast that with oil. If you have an olive oil lamp, assuming that you're dealing with like pure olive oil, what sound does the oil make as it's burning?
Does it make
It doesn't make any sound, right? Does it produce smoke if it's done right?
No.
No, the oil just kind of gives itself over totally to become the flame. So if you were to go in the ancient time to the marketplace and you buy olive oil, what are you buying? You're buying illumination, right? Now, is the illumination in the form of illumination right now? It's in the form of oils, right? But when you put that in the lamp and you light it, it becomes illumination, and it just dissolves away into it. It just lets itself go, becomes the illumination. And so the way Chassidus thinks about this as a metaphor is that the fulfillment of the oil is the flame, in a way that's not really true about the log. The log, I bought it for the flame. But the log, in some degree, can become the flame, but in some degree, resists. So you can't really say the true fulfillment of the log is to become the fire. That's my interest in the log. But with the oil, the oil completely lets itself go into becoming the flame, so it's like that's its fulfillment. To give you a different analogy for the same idea, Chassidus says that if you have a cup, what is this? This thing in the middle, this is empty space, right? I mean, it has air, but let's ignore that, right? So now, I have 2 cups here. Which one has empty space in it? The one on my left hand, the one on my right hand. So what Chassidus would say is the one in my right hand is a truer version of the empty space than the one in my left hand.
Because it can't take anything out?
No, because when we say this is empty space, what do we mean by that? What?
There's no such thing as empty.
No, that's actually a dispute amongst the medieval commentators in Judaism, but we're not going into that right now. The space is to be filled, right? When we talk about the space like in a cup, that space is defined by the fact that it's supposed to be filled. So this space is lacking. What is it lacking? It's lacking, right? The whole purpose of the space is to be filled, and it is not filled. So it's right. Think about a person. When a person doesn't have the things that really make them actualize, make them whole, they feel lacking, right? So if we could personify the space for a moment and ask the space, how do you feel right now? So I kind of feel kind of sad because I'm not my true self. I'm a space for Rabbi Kaufmann to drink water from, and there's no water in me. So I'm not really myself. In other words, the emptiness is truly itself when it's full, provided that what kind of emptiness are we talking about? An emptiness that is meant to be filled. Make sense?
Mm-mm.
Okay. But the whiteboard we're not using it, right? If the whiteboard had a self-esteem issues, it might be very sad because
But
the whiteboard.
Is it not still empty?
But the thing is, this is the point, is that sometimes the reality of something in its tangible manifestation cuts against what its true essence is. The true essence of the empty space is to be filled. So it's truly itself when
It's filled.
when full. The true essence of the oil is to be light, and physically gives itself over to that. Why it doesn't resist it. The log, we don't say that. We say you can get fire out of the log, but the log has a complicated relationship with it. I'm not necessarily so pleased with it. If you were to anthropomorphize the log for a second, say, how do you feel? It's like, well, the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination of log, like, yes, I'm finally fulfilling a higher purpose. And the Yetzer Tov, like, I hate this. I'm going to resist. And they get crackling and smoke. So the thing is, in order for God's presence to be revealed, it's not enough that something become like the fire subsumed in the flame. It has to be something that is totally given over. It totally gives itself to that truth. And so when it says, and this is the problem with the person and the divine presence. Why do we call it the divine? But why do we going back to the person is like the wick? What do people care about? Frankly, what people go. What are people's lives about? Themselves as distinct entities from each other and from God. So what happens if a person tries to encounter God, His presence? There's a clash, right? Because I want God. I want to be close to God. Where's the value coming from? From my distinct beings caring about something. So it turns out, strangely, my desire to be closer to God actually does what to divine presence? Pushes it away. Because what's the divine presence? That there's only Him. What's my desire about? The importance of me distinctly.
But you're seeing how one aspect of
Give me another aspect.
just like the two souls.
So this is where we get interesting. Is that even the godly soul has a problem
With what?
with the divine presence.
Even though it's himself.
Because here's the thing. What makes something valuable? So let's run through a few different things. Let's start with food. What makes food valuable?
Nourishes you.
It nourishes you. So if your soul was in Gan Eden in heaven, would food have any value anymore? What? No. Okay. So the value of food isn't really coming from you in kind of a deep sense. It's a circumstantial issue. Like you happen to be in a body. The body's a biological organism. They can't survive without food. So, okay, I guess now the food becomes important. Right? Let's go one step further. Is seeing important?
Yes.
Why? Why is it important?
People live without it.
That's true. I didn't say is it like absolutely critical. You could live without seeing, but is it important?
Yes.
Why? No, definitely, you can see you're safer. Okay. But notice, like, you had to move away from seeing in order to explain the value of seeing. It's like you could, God forbid, get hurt, and so in order to prevent you from getting hurt, you need to know what's going around you, and so seeing is a way to deal with that, right? What if you just couldn't get hurt? What would happen to the value of seeing at that point?
It's pleasurable.
What's that? Just with that particular.
Then you don't.
Wouldn't really need it. So what's the problem here? Is that if there's a part of you which is truly invulnerable, truly transcendent, right? A part of you that would survive death, does that part really need seeing? Okay. You said it's pleasurable. Here's a problem with pleasure. Why do people look for pleasure in things?
To feel more.
Right. In other words, if your life isn't pleasurable enough on its own, then how do you deal with that? You supplement that with things you get from other things. My wife has a sign up in the bathroom, which I don't know the exact quote, but it says something. It says the most enjoyable things in life are the ones you do for yourself. There's an idea in Chassidus which basically goes along the following lines. Deep down, the soul is wonderful. So the more in touch you are with your soul, the more pleasure you have. But also, you're not getting pleasure from other things. The more you're looking in pleasure for things is a way of compensating and poorly for not being in touch with your soul. So again, if I was in touch with my soul, I'm not saying pleasure would lose value, but the fact that other things are valuable because they give me pleasure would lose value because there's a poor substitute. Okay, to give a simple example to this, if a person has a deep sense of intrinsic self-worth, right, that it seems like silly and unnecessary to go around looking for compliments for their achievements from other people. But a person lacks that sense, right, then getting complimented by other people for their achievements feels like really important. Are you seeing the problem, like when you start to explain why things are valuable, what ends up happening? It turns out that the value is really coming from circumstances, not really from something deep in yourself.
But are there like any patterns in the circumstances? Meaning the circumstances can change, but like the reason for why you value them
Yes.
doesn't.
Yes. So now here's
So like, let's say like the value here is like it is valuable to feel like purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
That value can manifest itself in many ways depending on circumstances, but like does that cease to be valuable, like purpose, let's say?
Well, look, you could, I mean, if you go deep enough, because you can start to realize that purpose also is because you have a certain particular sense of yourself. Do you have a sense that there's a greater world and you were created within that world, and so your value in that world is purpose? But if you were to go to a deeper level where like you're really subsumed within the truth of God, like God doesn't need a purpose for his existence, and so you're going to run.
Everything's constructed.
Everything is constructed. And the problem with the soul is that the soul is also constructed. The soul has the power to love. And that's very important. But again, if you think, well, why is it important to love? Why is it important to love God? Why is it important to love other people? You start to realize that that's constructed. It doesn't like have some sort of deep intrinsic value on its own. And again, I don't mean to devalue love. It's just that
nothing has intrinsic value.
this creates the problem. So Chassidus says we have a problem. Anytime something is, we value something, anytime we say something is important, we're already working within a framework, we're already working within a structure. And now here's the problem. That framework, that structure, is in opposition to the idea that there's only God.
So the soul, in essence, is, like you said, it's constructed. It's not just
So it's complicated. When we talk about the soul as it plays out in our life, it's constructed. The soul has different faculties. The soul has an understanding of God. The soul has a love towards God. The soul has a sense of duty towards God, right? And if I ask you just the soul itself, like strip away, hey, like, well, what? Not my sense of loyalty to God, not my love of God, not my awe of God, not my understanding of God, not my sense of His presence, not my none of it. Like, they're like, oh, look, what's left? So you are right that there's a kind of true underlying godly essence of the soul, but that's not something that's integrated into the life of a person. When we talk about the soul and the life of a person, it manifests in particular kinds of ways we relate and function. And those are very important. I mean, eating is very important too. But it's only important if I take a specific structure for granted. And I make everything have to fit within that. But like, if we're talking about the truth of God being revealed, then that structure doesn't have any inherent weight to it. And so you run into an interesting problem. If I can appreciate and understand why something is important, it ironically, subtly, is pushing away God's presence. Because it's saying that there's this other thing that has value on its terms within its own structure, which is distinct from just the absolute total being of God. Now, there's a mitzvah. We'll pick a mitzvah. You familiar with the mitzvah of hearing the shofar? Okay. Now, if one were to sound the shofar on the third day of Tishrei, Tishrei is a Jewish month, and they did it on the third day, is that a mitzvah? Why not? Okay. What is it between the first day of Tishrei and the third day of Tishrei? Who cares? Like, what's the difference? Well, explain to me the difference between the first day of Tishrei and the third day of Tishrei, and why it matters when I blow the horn. Actually, let me ask you a different question.
We were told to do it.
Let me ask you a question. Different question. Yeah. What if, when I blow the shofar, instead of using a ram's horn, I use a bull's horn?
It's not.
What's the difference?
One is the right one, one is the wrong one.
Why? Now, if you tell me why I should eat food and not plastic, I can explain that to you, right? Because
The ones with
food will
God
food will nourish me and plastic won't, right? If you want to tell me, look, why it's important to find purpose, is because that's how one can feel significant within a sense that their life isn't an automatic given, right? And there's a wider world around you, right? If you say, why is it important to love? Because that's what makes us feel devoted and connected, which allows us to do fully and properly the things that we're supposed to do, both vis-a-vis other people and God, right? I can explain to you why all those things are important, right? Explain to me why I have to use a ram's horn on the first of Tishrei. I'm not asking you how you know that that's what you have. I'm asking explain to me why.
Just because God commanded it.
So, can you explain the value?
No.
There's nothing.
So here's the thing. Mitzvahs have no value if you take out the fact that God willed it. And that's something that's unique about. There's nothing valuable about mitzvahs other than the fact that God willed you to do it. So the mitzvah actually reveals the oneness of God. It reveals His presence in a way that nothing else can. So you say, what's the importance of loving God? Well, if I don't love God, I won't do mitzvahs properly. I won't feel devoted to Him. I'll feel disconnected. I can explain, right? And what's the problem if I don't shake the lulav? The problem is God's will wasn't done. Like you can't resort to something other than just referring back to just God, not a larger context. To put this in different terms, I'm gonna let you ask a question. There's something that we have morality. Heard of morality? Mm-hmm. Okay. Many people find morality a comfortable way to be a religious person. Right? After all, why should you believe in an invisible, super powerful being that can't be explained? And the answer is, well, do you feel that morality is an important thing? Yes. Is it possible that you can only feel that morality is fully grounded if you grounded in something like God? That's possible. I don't want to get into that debate. And so, what is the basis of a person taking God seriously and trying to live a religious life is God becomes the crutch they would use to support the morality. So who are they really worshiping? And whose sense of morality? Their own. And they created a sense of God to be a philosophical grounding for them. Is that what mitzvahs are? No, mitzvahs are like explicitly the opposite of that. It's like, what is the point of sitting in the sukkah? And again, sometimes you learn about mitzvahs and you have explanations, right? When you think about those explanations, what you'll notice is those explanations only suffice if you ignore all of the actual laws of the mitzvah. So we'll use a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to give tzedakah. You've heard of this mitzvah? Mm-hmm. Okay. How much tzedakah do you have to give? Minimum.
10%.
No. That's if you're a decent person, you should give 10%. What's the minimum requirement? Close. It's 1/3 of a shekel. A year. A year. One should not give less than 1/3 of a shekel a year, if I remember correctly. Not the Talmudic shekel. You have to figure out what that is in prices of silver or whatever. It's not that much. What if you are poor and you are being supported by tzedakah? You're being supported by tzedakah. Do you still have to give tzedakah?
You're supposed to give it a different
Yes.
way.
Explain that.
With your time.
No, not with your time.
Oh, you're supposed to give.
You have to give at least 1/3 of a shekel a year, even if you're being supported by tzedakah and have no income.
So you use tzedakah to give tzedakah.
That's right. Why? Because God wants every Jew to give tzedakah. In other words, if tzedakah is simply God's way of addressing social injustice, then the person who's supported by tzedakah, is there any reason for him to be giving tzedakah?
Well, I feel like you could argue it's to foster generosity.
Isn't there a term?
So even someone poor should be able to give.
Right. The problem there is the problem there is now, if we're going to be honest, 1/3 of a shekel a year is not exactly a large amount of money. If you told me there was a mitzvah to give tzedakah every day, like as some kind of like ethical training, okay, fine. And things like this, you can keep going to all the little nitty-gritty details of any mitzvah, even the most moral or rational mitzvah, and you know what you'll discover when you really go into it? At a certain point, it's like there's no real explanation of why those are the rules. So generally we say mitzvahs are chukim. We're referring to mitzvahs that the basic mitzvah itself doesn't seem to have any rational basis. But there is an idea that you can extend that idea to all mitzvahs, because all mitzvahs, when you get into the nitty-gritty details, have that element. And that's the idea, is that chukim represent this idea that it's just the will of God. There isn't any of value to it absent God. Okay, so mitzvahs, because they reflect this just will of God, rather than something that serves a kind of purpose that can be understood within its own context, mitzvahs are uniquely like the oil, right? The thing that's just totally given over to the flame, mitzvahs just totally given over. Mitzvahs, like if you really get into mitzvahs for what they are, it's like the oil, it just burns cleanly and silently into the flame. It doesn't resist. There's nothing in the mitzvah that pulls you away from just a total focus on God. Now, that's again if you engage the mitzvah as a mitzvah. What if you try to twist the mitzvah into something else? Like mitzvahs become about other values. And this happens, like sometimes you see this, like a person like, why should we keep Shabbos? And to get off of work, spend some time with family, right? There's lots of good things, right? But then what ends up happening when you start getting into nitty-gritty details of Shabbos, all of a sudden it feels like there's a disconnect. For instance, if a person were to live on a ranch, so there's no other houses in the area, it's not a city, because if you move to the city, it's going to be a little more different. And their house catches fire on Shabbos. What is the Jewish law there?
Your life over the laws of Shabbos.
That's true. Your life, it comes precedence. So what should you do?
Call 911.
Run out of the house and get everyone else out of the house. Okay. Are you allowed to put out the fire? No. Because putting out the fire is not
your
saving
life's-
life, that's saving property. And saving property does not change the laws of Shabbos.
Call 911.
Well, if you're in a city, not only can you require to, because in a city, a fire in one building creates a threat of life to everybody. That's why I put it, you live on a ranch. right? There's no concern of the fire spreading to other buildings. People don't know and getting caught. Like everyone's out of the fire, it's going to burn down. Okay. Can you ask a Gentile to put out the fire?
No.
No.
You can't ask someone to do something.
But you can do, just to be fair, there is one rule. You can say, this is the one of the people don't realize this. Usually, if you can't ask the Gentile, you also have to stop them from doing it. There are very few cases where you can just allude to it or say something. This is one of them. So you could say, there's a fire. If anyone puts it out, I'm sure they won't regret it. But that's if you have a Gentile in the area and they pick up what you mean. But like, now if you ask the person, say, the value you see in keeping Shabbos justifies letting your house and all your possessions burn to the ground. So you get into the nitty gritty details, like take this is the will of God out of it, and like it falls apart. So that's like the oil. The mitzvahs are the oil. My sense of love and fear, of devotion, understanding of God, they have kind of a value in their own context. So like the wood, they're like focused. There's a tension there. On one hand, it's about God. On the other hand, there's something back at its own structure, its own value, its own significance. Okay.
But I feel like somebody can still follow all the mitzvot and not be a good good person.
Well, you can follow all the mitzvahs. You can't follow all the mitzvahs because there are non-physical mitzvahs. Right. One of them is to emulate God in your character. So if you're a God-fearing person, you're keeping all the mitzvahs, and you have to be a good person. At least is what the Torah defines as a good person. Right. So right now we're just focused on mitzvahs per se. We're still going to have to talk about that physical mitzvahs more specifically.
How would emulating God make you a good person? God's some heinous thing.
Oh, that's very simple. Let's assume for a moment that your mother is a decent mother. I'm assuming that's true. Maybe not, but I'm hoping that's the case. Yeah. Now, did she ever take you to the doctor? Your mother ever?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Did the doctor ever give you shots?
I don't like this example. I don't think it's accurate. I think it's like a very intense simplification.
Well, what's the point then?
You're making the point that when God does bad things or things we perceive as bad, there's some underlying reason.
No, that wasn't the point at all.
Because that's like a mashal I
that
know
was,
Rabbi gives, but I don't.
But that wasn't the point that I was bringing.
So what's your point?
And that wasn't that's not the underlying reason. When your mother brings you to the doctor, gives you a shot. Okay. The issue is not justification. Would it be correct to conclude that action your mother took is reflective of who your mother is? That's the question. Mm-hmm. In other words, your mother's the kind of person, right, who delights in having her child stuck with needles and feel pain. Is that a correct understanding of the event? No. Right. This is where the idea of reason comes in, which is what the Rabbi is getting at. It's like this. There is some calculation on her part. Whether that calculation is justified or not justified is beside the point. The reason why it's important to know that there's a calculation is to mean that there's a disconnect between who they are and behavior. This is something we do all the time.
That doesn't work on God.
It does work on God.
His law doesn't work on God because God constructed all of the realities.
Well,
so imagine your mom created a scenario where the only way that you could be healthy is by experiencing pain. Would we still have the same understanding of our mother as a good person?
No. But the point of the analogy is not... The point of the analogy... First off, there's different kinds of analogies. There's analogies that are meant to understand things. There's analogies that are meant to demonstrate that that's the case. In other words, if you're asking a separate question, which is, since God could do anything, why does he make suffering? This is not an analogy for that. If you're asking
this is an analogy for like the shallowest level of it.
No, this is an analogy for a deeper level, which is like this. I have two conflicting problems. Two things that create a problem, which is, on the one hand, I have a sense of who God is. On the other hand, I see God has acted in a way that's inconsistent with that. Okay? So the question is, A, is my understanding of God wrong? Or my, right? In other words, I have two things equivalent. There's my sense of God is good, and my sense that God did this thing that's bad. So one thing has to get modified, or the other. Either my sense of God has to get modified, or I have to say that what God did doesn't directly come from who God is, that creates a whole set of different questions, but that's not the point here. Okay? In fact, this is an important thing in just in human relationships. If you have a human relationship with another person, the only way you can have like a deep relationship with another person is if you think they're a good person. After a while, if you don't think they're a good person, you're gonna pull away. Here's the problem. Everybody does bad things. Forget God for a moment. Everybody does bad things. Now, if you're going to have a deep relationship with a person, whether it's your children, whether it's your spouse, so how are you going to have to understand that? The way you understand is very simple. When they do bad things, that's because of reasons. Not even have to be good reasons, it just has to be reasons. Because the minute it's a reason, what does that mean? It's not reflective of the deeper truth of them. And therefore, I can still have a relationship with them. Okay? I don't really want to talk about this. This is more important than the topic I actually wanted to talk about. Let's say a person is going to be a chaplain in a prison. But you may say, well, I shouldn't be a chaplain in a prison. But let's say someone is. So who are they there to help? Why are the prisoners there?
They did something bad.
They did something bad. So why are you trying to help them? But they're bad people.
Not
They
inherently.
made bad choices.
Right, okay, but don't those choices reflect who they really are?
Well, there's a spectrum also, I would say, of prisoners.
And there's a spectrum how effective chaplains are.
The
What
same
makes
as like,
someone bad?
What?
At what point does someone become a bad person?
If one takes this idea all the way to its conclusions, then it means deep down nobody's truly a bad person. Not everybody has the depth to be able to deal with that. In other words, it is people that do horrible things, there's a lot of reasons that go into it. Some of those are very bad reasons. But to put this another way, people are the hero of their own story. People are trying to do, on some level, what seems right to them, going back to the thing to do good.
This
Right?
is Jewish thought.
Well, now the question is, this is an appropriate thing to do. So if you're a chaplain, then yes. If you're a judge, then not necessarily. There's different roles in life, right? So, but because the chaplain's job is to see the person as a person created in the image of God and try, as long as they're still living on earth, that their life should be a good, meaningful life. And that can't happen unless you get in touch with the goodness in that person. Which means you have to understand, not that what they did is right, and not that they had good reasons for doing it, but that they had reasons. And in as much as they...
I didn't ask if God is good, I asked why we should emulate God.
Oh, so getting back to this. So now, the mitzvah to emulate God is to emulate things that come from His character, not from His reasons. That was what I started to say. So there's a list of things, specifically in Halakha, what you're supposed to emulate.
It's
and
like
what
show,
you're not.
don't tell. It's like God told us He's good, but He didn't show.
No, it's the things that God actually prides Himself and identifies with.
It's God's world, and He's just letting it.
That's true, right? So God...
I'm just saying, like, it all feels so arbitrary. God just told us, like, I am good, these are the good things about me.
And that,
And we are, like, supposed to just disconnect any of our experiences or interpretations from that.
No. Every topic has to be within a particular framework. In the framework that we're talking about in this class right now, how a human being relates overall to God and to Judaism, we're setting that aside. Okay? Within the context of Judaism, there's a question, right? Which is, God says to emulate Him. It's like a purely technical question. That's the way I understand it. God says to emulate Him, and then God does things that I'm not supposed to emulate. How am I supposed to understand that? And the answer is, there's a difference between what is done due to reasons and what is done as a result of one's character, let's say. And then one could go deeper. We can say even character in human beings can be developed due to reasons, right? That's what the chaplain example, right? So then what we would say is like this, okay, what things of God does God say this reflects who I really am? And what are things of God that God is saying within the realm of how human beings understand it? These are things that have reasons. And in as much as they have reasons, they don't reflect back on how you relate. And this was the other point, the analogy of his letter, is that the child who is not overly sophisticated has an intuitive sense that when their mother takes them to the hospital or to the doctor or gives them a shot, they have no comprehension of the reason. It is completely irrational. It's completely not justifiable. It makes no sense to them. Like a small child, I have small children. Like they do not. It's not like, oh, I understand my mother meant well. They don't understand it. They think it's totally non-comprehensible. What do they have a sense of? That there was a reason. In what sense? Not a good reason. Just means that what?
They trust them.
This does not reflect who my mother really is. And therefore, right after the shot, where do they run back to?
Mom.
That's the root of the point of idolatry. So when you're asking in the context of emulating Hashem, that's where that idea
These are
comes into
mom.
play. How does a person now deal with actual suffering, tragedy in their life becomes a very individual question, which is not the topic of the class at all.
Reason seems to like allude to something separate from God. So how can
Yeah, I realize that.
no, how can he have any reasons for any of his actions?
Does he?
When we're talking about relating to God, we have to remember two things. One, that we have no way of understanding God, period, full stop. Two, God has tried to convey himself to us through the Torah. So what that means is, if I'm asking what are God's reasons, I'm not asking what are God's reasons in some ultimate sense. I'm saying in the sense that God is trying to make it that we can have some inkling of the truth of him. He's saying these things are like reflective of me, and these things are like reflective of reasons. And now doing that, all that philosophical work is like beyond the scope of this class. And it's not always necessarily important, by the way. Again, the child doesn't necessarily do all the philosophical work. The child can just suffice with two senses, right? That their mother is doing this not because of who she is, and who she is someone who cares and loves me and will protect me. And the child can experience those things cohesively. Okay, so emulating, anyway, there's mitzvahs, there's all kinds of mitzvahs. So what's the point of physical mitzvahs? The simple point of physical mitzvahs is like this. If your soul doesn't have a body, it can do the non-physical mitzvahs. If the soul doesn't have a body, it can do non-physical mitzvahs. Do souls in heaven, do they understand things? Yeah, so if there's a mitzvah to understand things, it could do that. Or do souls in heaven feel things?
No.
Yeah.
Not physically.
Feel like emotions, love of God, fear of God.
They do.
Yeah. Do souls in heaven communicate with each other?
Do they feel it in the same way that we feel things?
No, because they don't have physical sensations. So they feel it much more acutely. Okay? So any mitzvah that involves some kind of an experience, some kind of mental process, some kind of communication, some kind of personal development, in principle that mitzvah could be done just with the soul. And so the body is not the living flesh and blood human being is not an integral part of the mitzvah. Okay, to illustrate, do I need a phone to talk to my wife?
No.
I do
If you're
here,
gone.
because I'm here and she's there, and without that phone, it's not going to work, right? But that's circumstantial. Once I go back home, I'm not going to need the phone, right? Okay. So does your soul need a brain to learn Torah? No. Now, if your soul is in the physical world, it's going to need a brain. But if your soul goes back to heaven, does it need a brain anymore?
No.
It's study Torah anymore. Does your soul need a heart in order to feel emotions? In this world, it does. But if the soul is parts from this world, it doesn't. Is this making sense? This idea that really every part of your body that you need to do mitzvahs, you don't really need it. If you just weren't in the physical world, you could do that same thing some way. Okay. Can you blow a shofar without an actual shofar?
No.
And without lungs? So what does that mean about the physical mitzvah of blowing shofar, or the physical mitzvah of giving tzedakah? The body is an integral part of the will of God. So where is the place where the will of God and the physical human being actually meet?
In the physical mitzvah.
In the physical mitzvah, and only in the physical mitzvah. The less physical a mitzvah is, the more the body is just a technicality. And so the will of God, the presence of God, reaches the soul, but not reaches the body. So if you really want the presence of God to reach us, then we need to live our lives in the accordance with the will of God, and specifically the physical parts of our lives.
Wait, so you're saying that the more physical a mitzvah is in the act of performing a mitzvah, that's the closest we'll get to the divine presence?
That's the divine presence gets closer to us as human beings, as physical people. Right? If I'm studying Torah, that's the will of God, and the will of God is reaching my cognitive mind, and has no connection to me as a physical human being, because the fact that I have a physical brain involved in that process is a technicality, right? But when I clean my house for Pesach, you can't exactly clean your house for Pesach if you don't have a house and a hand to scrub things with, right? So at that point, my physical life has become something incorporated into the will of God. and if it's the will of God of the mitzvah that actually bring divine presence, then the only way the divine presence actually reaches me as a human being is in the physical mitzvahs.
Why are there so many mitzvahs we can't do now?
Because we're in exile.
So God created us in this being that wants to do the physical mitzvahs to connect to events that we can't do them.
No, well, exile is our fault.
If he's keeping us in it.
Is anything really our fault?
When do we get out of exile?
When Mashiach comes.
And what determines when Mashiach comes?
Sure.
Us doing
Oh.
more here, but ultimately it's up to Hashem, no?
No.
So independently of Hashem, Mashiach will come.
Well, see, the thing is, like, it's like making it no, this is making it into a paradigm.
They're
Okay?
doing it, we can't.
To use a very, very, very simple analogy, okay? If I tell my child that they have to go to timeout until they calm down, who determines when they leave timeout?
You.
No, the child is.
Oh, when they come down.
It's not really like if you're thinking one versus the other, it's not incorrect, right? In other words, I said they can only leave when they calm down. I don't control when they calm down. They control when they calm down. If they calm down in 1 second, then they leave in 1 second.
What
They
if
calm
you
down after
perceive-
25 minutes. They leave in 25 minutes.
What if you perceive them calming down as something like if they feel that they've calmed down, but then you don't perceive them?
Okay,
as
but
having-
that goes back to like it's an analogy, and I'm not God, right? God can see the truth
yeah.
of things, right?
So is Mashiach only going to come when everyone here is also like, I know you God?
Mashiach comes when we have sufficiently done what we need to do.
But only
Now,
God
is that
can determine what's sufficient.
true?
So then it's His will, not ours.
No, it's not His will, not ours. It's that the idea that you're setting these up in opposition to each other is a mistake. His will has given the authority over to us. Now, not us to decide when we want to leave, us when we decide when we to
Putting
do the
in
thing.
the effort.
So at the end of the day, it's God's will that exile ends when
We need to calm
do
down.
what
to
we
get
need to
a
do.
timeout.
But it's our will to do what we need to do. So at the end of the day, either we're getting exile out of a kind of a joint sense of will, or it's not. It's not like a negotiation between two people. It's what you want versus what God wants. That's not how this works.
Only
We're
one.
supposed to do everything that God wants us to do, and then we'll decide when we've done enough. We have to keep acting as if we have to do everything, but before then He can decide it's enough.
Why would I send my kid to timeout and tell them that they can't come out until they calm down? That's just some arbitrary thing I came up with one day. No. So why would what?
But when I asked if they all have to be emulating God, you said not necessarily.
Right. No. I agree. That's true. But one thing at a time. So why would I send my kids to timeout until they come out when they calm down?
So that you start calming down.
Good. Okay. Now, am I arbitrarily deciding what's calming down? That has like a certain reality to it, whatever it is. Okay. Now, why do we go into exile? Because we sin? No. Sin per se doesn't put you into exile. When the Jewish people sinned, the first time they sinned, they went into exile? No. So when did they go into exile? When the sinning met a certain kind of a threshold, right? A certain kind of level, whatever that level is, okay? So then, when do we get out of exile?
When we get back to that.
When we undo that, right? Now, we could understand that quantitatively, how many sins and how much tshuva. But we could also understand it qualitatively, which is probably better, right? One of the things that happened is that not that we sinned, but that sinning became something that was acceptable on a certain level. Because of a certain sense of things, a certain way of relating to things, a certain way we relate to the world, a certain way we relate to God, a certain way we relate to ourselves. Okay. Is it possible that that can change in a sufficient way to bring about redemption before everyone becomes a perfectly righteous person? Yeah. In other words, there's a level of changing how we move through the world, both practically in terms of the mitzvahs we do, and subjectively in how we see ourselves, that undoes the thing that is the problem for exile and brings down Mashiach. That's not synonymous with everybody first becoming a perfectly righteous person. In fact, the contrary. The tradition is that everyone becomes a perfectly righteous person as a result of the coming of Mashiach. Okay? So, if you would like a physical metaphor, in physics there's something called a chain reaction. So, in nuclear physics, the way this works is that you have, like, say for instance, uranium. Uranium decays. And when uranium atoms decay next to other uranium atoms, there's a statistical likelihood of causing those ones to decay. And you can, now, what happens if the uranium atoms are not so packed tightly together? Then one decays, and another decays, and another decays, and that's how kind of uranium is in the natural thing, right? What if you take all the uranium atoms and you pack them very, very, very tightly together? What's going to happen? One decay is going to cause the 3 next to it decay, and the 3 next to it are going to cause the 9 next to it, and then in a very, very short period of time, they all decay very quickly, and then by Japanese cities, right? That's kind of how that goes. So what do you need to do to make the nuclear bomb go off? You get all the uranium atoms to be what? Really, really close together. Do you need them to decay in some sort of unnatural way? No, you just need to put them in proximity, right? You need to change the circumstances so that the things that exist cause a radically different, right?
So we have to change the circumstances.
Right, we have to change the way, for instance, one of the things that we have to do, I'm not saying that this is the thing that this is the thing that has yet to be done, but this is something that had to be done, is that we have to have a sense of devotion to Torah and mitzvahs that's not predicated on what's in it for us. Because that was the source of that was the source of one of the things that got us into exile to begin with. Okay, so that's something that has to be corrected. Now, I'm not saying it's the only thing that has to be, it's something that has to be corrected. Has that, roughly speaking, been corrected? There is definitely a notion of Judaism that is not like, oh, if we're righteous, then then there'll be wonderful bounty. I mean, Jews have tried to keep Torah mitzvahs in worst of circumstances, right? And a real expectation that things are necessarily going to get better because of it. Right? A sense of this is a core element of who we are in our identity. So again, I'm just using that as one facet. So the people that God communicates more directly might be able to share more of what we need to fix. But it's not like, but it's very clear that it's not, oh, everything needs to be fixed and then Mashiach comes. It's everything needs to be put back in a sufficient way that catalyzes a lasting change. The specifics, I don't know. It's like I can know the general idea of making a nuclear bomb. It doesn't mean a nuclear physicist. I can tell you the exact details.
Are we doing this well in this world to connect with Shannon then, or to bring Mashiach?
I asked my 6-year-old this. You know what he said? He said to bring Mashiach. And I said, okay, why do we want Mashiach? He said, no. He
They
says,
will understand it.
no. I want to know what the 6-year-old said. 6-year-olds are very wise. He said, because then we can do all the mitzvahs. So I said, so you're doing mitzvahs to bring Mashiach? He says, yeah. And you want Mashiach to come so you can do all the mitzvahs? He says, yeah. So you're doing mitzvahs so you can do more mitzvahs? He says, yeah. I said, why? He says, because mitzvahs are great.
But then we're serving for the idea of bringing Mashiach and not for.
But what is Mashiach?
It brings us.
Mashiach is a state where we get to do all the mitzvahs. That's all Mashiach is.
But we.
In other words, there's a bit.
But all the
Is that all
godliness
Mashiach
gets
is?
revealed.
Yeah.
Like, how do we assign all this other stuff to it? Like
Because
peace
that goes along with it.
So
Because
we're really
you
doing
can't.
it for that, though.
What?
We're doing it for all the byproducts of it.
No. I mean, you might be, but you're not supposed to be.
Exactly.
Okay,
but
suppose
then
you- I'm
when
saying most
we
people.
walk around saying like we want, like, you might personally be thinking it's so we can do more mitzvah, but other people don't get that idea.
I'm aware of this. Why do you think I had a conversation with my 6-year-old? You have to educate them young. You can't allow people.
Is it really
No.
possible to do something?
One second.
Not for yourself.
One second. One of the reasons why we're in exile is a different reason. Is because we're perfectly comfortable staying in exile. We don't want to get out of exile.
Can someone?
We would like exile without all the negative side effects. Like exile without war and without sickness and without all, those things. We'll take that.
sounds nice.
It does sound nice, and that's why we're still in exile. Because to get out of exile, we actually have to want to be out of exile. Wanting to be out of exile is the ability to connect to God fully, which means to be able to do all the mitzvahs without any kind of external or internal impediments.
So can someone want Mashiach without doing anything until now?
Can a person want to work on their marriage without actually doing anything to make their marriage better?
Then it's like, how is that? No, because they want the reward of a nice marriage, but they're not willing to put in the effort.
But here's the thing, do they really want the reward of a nice marriage?
No.
Because they don't know what it is. Because here's the thing, a nice marriage is work even when it's a nice marriage. Like when Mashiach comes, it's still work.
For sure.
So there's things where what people want is an illusion of the thing, not the thing.
Exactly.
So if you're asking me what is one of the big obstacles for getting out of exile is that we don't want to get exiled out. We want the illusions of Mashiach rather than what Mashiach actually is. We would like it that there wouldn't be any violence. We would like it that there would be, enough wealth to go around. And we'd like it to be that everyone is happy and healthy. But we want that disconnected from what the underlying truth of those things are. It's like a person wants a happy marriage with no work. Because you don't want a happy marriage. You want the fantasy illusion of what a happy marriage is. Well, that's not gonna. Well, then you don't get a real marriage, really good marriage. You'd end up with a bad marriage. The same kind of thing.
Just like clarification, what was why are physical mitzvahs greater?
They're not greater. It's just they're the only way that Hashem's will actually relates to you as a physical person. Because otherwise, all the other mitzvahs, they don't really need you to be physically alive. You could do those things.
It's relate to you as a physical person. It's not dependent on it, but it's still you are loving with your physical heart. Yeah.
That's true, and I'm using my phone to talk to my wife, but it doesn't make it an integral part of our relationship.
So the fact that it's not dependent on it takes away from the fact that
That means, it might be elevated, it might become holy, and it might be refined, but the divine presence isn't engaged with that. When is the divine presence engaged with you as a physical person? It's because the divine will directly relates to you as a physical person.
But your neshama can't engage in other mitzvot because it's stuck in your physical body.
That's right, that's a technicality now, but before you were born and after you pass away,
But
you could do the other mitzvahs outside the body.
yeah,
there's the dependency on that.
Yeah, it's because the actual definition of that mitzvah necessarily entails the physical life of the person.
Because then no one in this world would not bring Mashiach without, if they actually understood that they would have to know the
What?
If you actually understood that when Mashiach came, that we'd have to do all the mitzvot, most people, I think, who would want Mashiach would not actually want it because they don't want to do the mitzvot.
Why don't they want
it?
it? So that's why don't they want to do the mitzvahs?
They're a burden.
Why are they a burden?
Because they don't always align with our desires.
it's the
So
animal
now
soul.
here's the question. Would you like it that your desires would align with God's desires, or would you like to keep it that they don't?
When your desires align with God's, when Mashiach comes.
We will. When
We'd like a nice, palatable amount of resistance to give us a sense of discipline, but nothing more.
No, I'm asking you a different question. Would you prefer, if I gave you a magic wand, would you prefer that God wanted all the stuff that you wanted, or you wanted all the stuff that God wanted?
I think neither. I think.
I'm giving you two choices.
Oh, just one of the
Thought.
two?
One
I
of
would
the
say I
two.
just prefer like there's no God at all.
Most people
Why do my desires have to align with anything else?
Hey, every sense of
I wish my desires just existed in the vacuum.
It would be a perfect world. They don't
So
understand
draining.
how to do it.
Yeah, let them want it, honestly.
But between your two options, I don't think there's a difference, because then my
Okay.
desires would be at one.
Okay, so
Even if you tell them that they're
here's the thing.
That's what I'm saying. It's just a false
Here's the thing.
idea.
A false promise.
One of the things that the Rebbe spoke a lot about the last few years of his life was the importance of wanting Mashiach. And one of the things the Rebbe said is the most important part of wanting Mashiach is to actually study about Mashiach, understand what Mashiach is. Because if you don't, then you can't really want it. You can't really value it. And it turns out studying about Mashiach actually forces us to deal with all sorts of fundamental issues like, do I actually want to be close to God? What is real existence? What is the purpose of life? Right? What makes something truly valuable and what makes something instrumentally valuable? Like all these things have to get addressed. Now here's the thing. The simpler you are, let's say a 6-year-old, the less difficult these issues are, because the thing is, like, people think that like children are like dumb, and they're not. They're simple and ignorant. They're not dumb. And so it turns out that children actually pick up on very, very profound truths, and because they're simple and ignorant, they just get right to them. They don't do a good job of integrating them into their lives and living up to them because they're children. Now what's the problem? Is we become more mature, we become more sophisticated, and we get sidetracked by a bunch of other things. Okay? But you'll be shocked, like when you have kids and your kids will like come and they'll say something, they'll be like, "You did that because you didn't want mommy to be upset with you, right?" Like, how does the 6-year-old know that? How does the 6-year-old know that you're doing something so your wife's not angry with you? And what's the answer? The answer is they can sense it. And that you have your kids pick up values. 98% is they see what you actually value. How do they see what you value?
They watch.
What makes you upset? What doesn't make you upset? What do you end up running late for? If you're always running late because you're trying to catch the end of a television program, then what does your children pick up on?
You value TV more.
Television. If you're running late because you're trying to finish your Tehillim, they sense this directly. Okay, now the problem is, as we get older, we have more specific, we have to learn more. Okay, so the same thing with Mashiach, right? It's actually not so difficult for a small child, right? For a small child, like, life is basically filled with a few very things. One of the things is there are others who I really feel like I want to be close to for inexplicable reasons. And when we engage in ways that we feel close, that's good, and that's what life is about, right? I have a 4-year-old, and I didn't want him to go somewhere because I thought he would enjoy my life. So I said, you know, if you stay, we'll play. I could play together. So where are we going to play? So whatever you want to play. I said, oh, it's amazing. So we sit down before and play with the Playmobil. Like, that's great. Why? Because life's not so complicated. Okay, so now, if I were to tell him, you know, if we play really nicely, then tomorrow we can play for a long time. Like, that makes perfect sense to him, right? But if we fight when we play, then we can't play tomorrow. That also makes perfect sense to him, right? But all of a sudden, when we talk to like adults who are so sophisticated, now we people are like, well, you know, are we doing mitzvahs to connect to God or to bring Mashiach? And that's because in all of our sophisticated thinking and all of our information, we've lost sight of the actual putting the picture together. And so it says, if you actually want Mashiach, which is critical to getting out of exile, that at least some number of people have to genuinely want to leave exile, other than like people who are perfect tzaddikim, regular people, then you have to know what it is in a way that it actually is something that you feel that you want and you lack. And then you're right, just going around with slogans is not good enough. You have to actually explain things, which is why the Rebbe said, please learn about it. Open up the books and learn and ask questions and come to understanding. And in doing so, you end up having to unpack all the fundamentals, like, what is the purpose of life? What do we mean by God? What is so important about doing
It just
mitzvahs?
doesn't feel like that's what people go out and do.
And we're in exile. See how?
No, but according to your mashal, arguably we'd have an easier time wanting Mashiach if we didn't explore what it really is.
If you were really simple. But
No,
you're
I
not.
think most people are.
No.
I think most people, if they on surface level are just told Mashiach is like the end of all pain and evil,
But
they're
that's
like, great,
not.
I want it.
But that's the
But
thing.
that's
That's
not
not what
what
Mashiach
Mashiach
is.
But that's my point. Once we start delving into it, then we stop wanting it.
So you have to work through that. And here's an annoying thing that I'm going to tell you.
It just feels like
Here-
we're at the point where everyone
can-
wants the false Mashiach.
Can I tell you something that's very, very important? There's a problem that people have, specifically people who aren't raised Orthodox, and then they come to Orthodox Judaism. And it's especially true if they're they come to Chabad. The problem is like this. If you say, look, I never grew up keeping Shabbos. You grew up keeping Shabbos, so you're the expert on Shabbos, so please teach me how to keep Shabbos. Like, okay, that roughly speaking can work. That makes sense? I never cut kosher. Please explain to me kosher. I never prayed with a sitter. Right? Okay, fine. Here's the thing. Is anyone here a proficient expert in getting the Jewish people out of exile and bringing about the Messianic era and the fulfillment of creation? No, because if we were,
You'd be Mashiach.
we wouldn't be in this situation. So in that sense, right, all you're pointing out is we're clearly not doing it properly because it isn't working. And my answer is, I agree with you. And knowing in the abstract what you're supposed to do is not the same thing as having proficiency in really doing it, right? Okay? But,
Why do we
one
stress
second. So then the thing is, we have to figure out how to do it in a way that actually works. And we're all, in that sense, we're all in the same boat, right? Imagine you've got a bunch of people decide they want to start keeping Judaism in an Orthodox manner, and they find a code of Jewish law, and they have no living Orthodox Jews to consult, and they try to start keeping Shabbos based on what they're reading. You can see that they're going to have some problems figuring out exactly what they're supposed to be doing. That's kind of where we are with this issue. So, like, I don't have, like, well, if we all just do this, then I can tell you in the abstract, But if I actually knew more concretely exactly what we need to do, an exact right way to do it, then what would happen?
Why do we like run around trying to kill them on people?
Because it's a mitzvah.
But then we don't take the time to explain to them what it
I mean, that depends on how much time they're willing to give you.
is. So is it more important to do a physical mitzvah right now, or to understand what we're going for, so we can appreciate just do the mitzvah on our own without someone saying, here, wrap this one up?
So there's a principle in Judaism which is that mitzvahs lead to mitzvahs. So if you, and there's another principle that a mitzvah has an infinite eternal value. So if understanding the value of Mashiach helps us want Mashiach more so that then Mashiach will come, that's instrumental value. Whereas the value of lighting Shabbos candles or putting on tefillin is itself the infinite value. So it doesn't make sense to sacrifice doing the mitzvah to like explain to somebody something. But now in real life, that's very often not such a trade-off, and you can go about it in different ways and things. But you can talk about things and explain things to people.
Is it more important to want Mashiach or to do mitzvahs?
More important to do mitzvahs. I mean, at the end of the day, wanting Mashiach is wanting to be able to do all the mitzvahs. And really, again, what does it mean to do
Then
mitzvahs?
you have to know that that's the Mashiach time you want.
I agree with you. So we should educate people. I think you now have a project to do for the rest of your life. Until Mashiach comes, right? You can set up an institution to educate people about what really Mashiach really is and why that's so good and why we should want it. You can make seminars and programs and,
But we don't know why
and
it's
YouTube
good.
videos. Well,
You just figured out.
No, you said in the beginning of this class that mitzvahs have no inherent value except that they're for God. None of us can
I didn't say
explain
for
why.
God. I said that the will of God.
Okay, but so none of us can really explain why the will of God is good.
We could.
It
Just
just
wasn't
is.
we could. It's not a topic of the class.
Is this over?
What is? Things are not divided into like specific topics like so naturally all interconnect. You can't talk about everything at once. You could talk about God. You could talk about the value of executive God. You could talk about all sorts of things. Right? You could talk about how you deal with suffering. The problem is that any one topic, a full understanding of it, ultimately you don't know a bunch of other stuff. You can't do it all at once. On a very, very, very simple thought experiment. Would you rather live in a fantasy world in your head where you experienced everything wonderful that you wanted, but the other people in your life didn't went on to live life normally and you're just like you're in your head? Or would you rather live life with other people in your life and experience the ups and downs of life together with them? The thought experiment. And what's the answer? The answer is most people feel conflicted on that. Because there's a part of us that wants to simply have pleasant experiences, right? And there's a part of us that wants to actually live the real reality that we're in. You can see this play out in all sorts of things, from the extreme things where people take drugs, right, all the way to people wanting to tune out with entertainment. Right? But it's very hard for a person to say, for sure, I want to live the reality of my life and be with the people, whatever that looks like, no matter what. That is a hard thing to do. It's also very rewarding. And you're right, a person who wants to, a person who makes peace with himself and living in some level of fantasy and illusion and escapism isn't going to want Mashiach. It's true. No, they're not going to want Mashiach. They might want some of the things that they associate with Mashiach.
I was going to say you could argue